All right, I'm going to make this video to help people with creating just small mini projects with code.org. And I'm going to kind of teach this in a way that AP, I think, is kind of wanting us to teach. So we have our quote maker, and again, we should be asking the following questions. What is its purpose? The purpose is to help a user come up with designs in terms of letting them change text, check out text against certain font families, against certain background colors, and against certain font sizes. It's very minimal. What's the functionality? Well, the functionality is by the user, typing in values and selecting from drop-down boxes and sliders in order to select values and kind of play around with values to see what kind of feedback they get. And then the inputs and outputs of this are as follows. Your inputs are going to be the text input here for quotes for the text. That's going to go inside of our text box here. In fact, I can run this and we can see that as I type in, this is a test, it types in automatically. So we know that that is an input event, and we'll get to that a little bit later down the road. I've got some drop down values that I can select, and that's going to change the font family. This color is going to change the background. And as I scroll up and down with my slider here, it changes the font. I'll notice that it does in fact change this feedback output. And right here it's telling us exactly how this feedback output gets changed. So if I choose lavender here and I choose Lucidia Sands, I get the sentence great combo. If I choose light green and I choose a specific font size, that's going to say looking fresh. And everything else is going to say nice design. So I've got everything that I need to design this program. And when I go to the place where I'm going to design, you'll notice that they give us nothing. This is fine. This is not a problem, actually. Some people, they get to this point, and they're like, oh, they didn't give me anything. But this is fine because there's a certain way that we can code that I find is a pretty simple way of doing it. And we start with the three basic huge building blocks. Imagine how a painter paints. They'll paint by blocking out the picture first, and then they'll put the details in. That's exactly how we're going to code this. We're going to code by putting the major work blocks in there first, and then we're going to start putting the details in. So first of all, we need to know what my values, my variables are going to be. And usually the variables that we're going to be storing, the values that we're going to be storing in them, are coming from my inputs. And so I'm going to be declaring 4 variables, and these are going to be reflected with the 4 values, these 4 inputs that I'm going to be grabbing from the user. So one of them is going to be quote text, and that's going to be an empty string, font family. That's also going to be set to empty string. Background color, I'm going to set that to empty string, and font size, I'm going to set that to empty string. So those are the 4 variables that I'm going to use to store what the user has typed in or has selected. What else do I need? Well, I need a way to collect the values that have been typed into quote, or the values selected, or the values selected here for font size. And those come from events. When the user types in something into the application, an event is fired. And we need to grab that event so that I can grab that change. So I at least know that I'm going to need 4 events. And how do I know that? Well, the first event is coming from this quote input. So I'm going to grab that. And what kind of event is it? Well, if I use the click event, then what's going to happen is when I click on it, I'm going to fire off the event. But that's not what I want. There's nothing going to be in that text box if I click on it, or if there is text, it's going to be the text that hasn't been typed out yet. Now, some people might think, well, I need it to be on the key up. Well, that could work, I suppose, or on key press. But there's actually another event in here that does exactly what we need. It's called input. And input is the event that gets fired when the user just types. Simple enough. I need another event for this drop-down, this font family drop-down. So I'm going to do font family input. Again, it's not going to be click because I don't want the event to fire when the user clicks. I want the event to fire when the user actually makes a change, when they select something from the drop-down box. Same thing for background color. That's going to be my color input. And again, it's the exact same idea as the font family. I want this to fire when the user has selected something, when there's a change. And same thing with font size input. I want this to also be fired when the user selects something and makes a change in the slider position. So that's how I want that to work. So now I've got my 4 events. Those are the only 4 events that are going to get fired. And now I ask the third question. The third question is, do I need any functions? Now, first of all, there are functions included with any on event. That's just the way this JavaScript works. Is there a specific function that I need? And when it comes for this particular lesson, yeah, there is a specific function that I'm going to write, and that's going to be for my update screen. When you do your create performance task, you're going to most likely have, as for your function, an update screen that updates the stuff in your screen. That's a typical function, and that's going to be a fully acceptable function for AP. And so I need to call this update screen, and I'm going to call it within every single event that gets fired. And even more so, I'm going to also call it right off the bat. So I'm going to do a copy and paste of this update screen and just paste this value so that each time I fire an event, I'm going to be updating the screen. Now, what am I going? Now I'm pretty much done with my block, except there's one more thing. Remember that quote that we had here that says that if they choose Lavender and Lucidia Sans, I have a different font feedback output. And if it's light green and the sliders in a certain spot, I have a different feedback output. So what that means is that I'm going to definitely need, that didn't get saved yet. Sometimes when you do that, when you go from one screen to another, it doesn't exactly save at the exact right spot. So one way to prevent that from actually happening is to just do a run, and that should automatically save this output, this code here. So what I'm going to need is I'm also going to need a if statement, and it's going to be an if statement that has an if, an else if, and then an else. So 2 Boolean values, and then a default. And what am I going to be doing in there? Well, I'm going to be setting a text in each one, and I'm going to be setting this feedback output. And I'm going to be setting it based on a certain Boolean value. One of them is going to be, good combo or great combo, I suppose is what it is. So great combo is one of them. Looking fresh is another one. And the default, which is nice design, is the last one. Thing is, I just don't know what those Boolean values are. Well, first of all, it's based on what gets stored in these 4 variables. Let's work on that first. So the user is going to type in this box here, and I want to grab what the user typed in. When the user types in, this on event gets fired, and I want to grab from the control that is storing the value that the user is typing in. So that's simple enough. I need to store whatever is getting typed in inside of quote text. And I want to get the text from the quote input. They are typing in the quote into the quote input control. So I need to get the text that they are typing into the quote input control. And I want to store that in quote text. That's all I need to do. And then I will update screen when that is done. I'm going to do the exact same thing for font family input. So I'm going to take this variable for font family that I've already defined. I'm also going to do a get text. And I want to get text from the font family input. So if the user selects something from the font family input, I want to get the text from that control, and I want to store it in font family. I'm going to do the same thing with color input. I'm going to grab that variable that I'm going to store this in. I'm going to be getting text from the color input, whatever they selected. From that color input, I want to store that string into background color. I mean, imagine if they drop down color and they choose lavender. Well, lavender is going to be what gets returned from get text, and the string lavender will be stored in background color. Now, font size input is different. Now, this is still a variable, and I'm still storing it inside of font size. But font size, the slider, is a value. Now, how do I know that? Because if I go into design and I click on this, it has a value here that's a number and has a minimum and a maximum value. So I need to store this value property And to do that, I'm going to do a get number, and I'm going to select font size input because I want to get the number of that value. Now, why the number and not the string? Because maybe instead of one value, I want maybe a series of values. And when it comes to font size, it is actually a value, a number that I'm storing into that property. So I want to keep it as such. I want to keep it as a number. Now I have stored all of the values that the user is putting into my quote maker. And I have them all here: quote text, font family, background color, and font size. Now, one thing that I do want to stress is that one problem though, as I have font size as a string, I'm going to change this to 18. The reason for that is, again, font size is a number. It is a value, not a string. And it's between 10 and 30, if you remember right. Remember, I go into design and click this, it's between 10 and 30. So I'm going to give it a default of 18. And I am also going to set its property. I'm going to set the property of the font size input. I'm going to set its value, and I'm going to set that to font size. So that will change this so that it is exactly in the right position based on the value 18 when it comes to what that means on the slider. Whatever that means on the slider, whatever position that means on the slider, it's going to do that for me. Now I need to worry about my if statement. Well, again, I am trying to find out if what's going on. If, in fact, the best thing for me to do at this point is to take this string and to put this into a comment. I'm just going to go into show text just quickly. The only reason why I'm doing that is so that I can put a comment in here in the following way. That's all. That's all I'm trying to do here. Okay. So what happens if you choose lavender and Lucidia Sans from the drop-down box? Well, how do I know if they chose lavender? Well, lavender comes from the background color. And so the background color, we need to check if that is in fact lavender. And Lucidia Sans from the font family. So I need to check if the font family is equal to Lucidia Sans. It's that simple. I'm checking this variable that has been set by the user. Did they select lavender? And did they select Lucidia Sans for the font family? These are the variables that I stored those values in. I just want to check if those variables have the value lavender and the value Lucidia Sans in them respectively. If so, well, that's going to say great combo. I'm going to do the same thing here. What if I chose light green? So background color is equal to light green, and the slider font size, and I'll say in this case, this font size is equal to 22. And we'll say 24. If it's equal to 24, then I want this to say looking fresh. Anything else, I want it to say nice design. And that's it. That's all this is really asking me. If I choose background color and it's equal to light green, or background color is equal to lavender, I want to check for other things. Notice that 24 is not in quotes. It's a number, so I choose 24 as a value. Also, I want to choose 24 because remember, it's in increments of 2. If you didn't see that, the design says that is in increments of 2 step size. So no odd numbers. So it's going to start with 10, then go to 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. So no odd numbers. So I choose 24 because I know that that number is going to get hit. What's the last thing I need to do? Well, I need to change the property of this quote output and this color output. So it's a bunch of set properties. I basically need 4 of them, 4 set properties. And what are the properties that I'm trying to set? Well, first of all, I want to set the color output, and that's going to be the background color of the variable background color. This contains my background color. This is the property that I want to change that value of background color. I want to store this background color value into this property, and this is the control that I want to do it in. Next thing is I want to change the quote output control. Quote output control. I want to change the text to be the text that they were typing in. So that is quote, what do I call it? Quote text. Just want to make sure I get the right variable. This contains the text that they're typing in. I want to do the same thing, quote output, and I want to change the font family to the font family value stored in this variable font family. Same thing, quote output. I want to change the font size to the value that's stored in the variable font size. And I think that's it. Let's test it and see if this thing works. So as I type in something, this is a test. It's working out just fine there. If I select a different font, it seems to be working just fine. Select a different color, that seems to be working just fine. And if I start selecting a different, now obviously we are not picking the right event. Now, and I know this because let's run this for a second. And I run, and I'm going to type something in. Just this is a test. And as I move this, I'm noticing that it's automatically changing. So there must be another event that allows me to see that. So I must be running the wrong event. So it must not be change. Maybe it's input. Let's try input. Let's see what happens. So this is a test. There it is. That's what we needed to have in there. We needed to have it be input. Okay. Now I need to test my if statement, and that's going to be if it's Lucidia Sands and lavender. Great combo. That seems to work just fine. Now we choose light green and a font size of 24. Looking fresh. And I do believe that I have fulfilled all of the requirements of this project. Now I do have a warning, and it's never a good idea to have warnings ever. So let's see what my warnings are and what kind of problems I have. I have this set property up here, and I never did anything with it. And what I wanted to do with this one is I wanted to set the font size, the value, equal to font size. I just wanted to reset that. Now, obviously, this seems to be a little bit of a, why am I doing that? If I'm doing this because at front, at the very first part of this program, I'm setting the font size to a value, default value of 18. This line 23 is going to set the control properly for me. After that, it's not necessary. It's almost redundant after this, but it's fine. It's okay. We don't necessarily need to worry about that. So it's going to set it, as you can see. Let me show you what it means. So you see where it's at right now. It's going to reset it there. But as you can see from here on out, it's not that big of a deal. It's not changing the program's functionality anyway. It's perfectly fine. It's just redundant afterwards. Could I do it once up here? Sure. It's not that big of a deal. But beyond that, I think this is exactly what they are looking for. So as I said, you can easily program these things by starting off with big blocks. Ask yourself, what are my inputs? Those are my variables. What are my events? How is the user running my application? And what have I put into that application control-wise that I can get feedback from the user? So the user is going to use these controls, and then I'm going to fire off events so that I can get that value that user typed in. I need to get those values that the user typed in, and those are going to be from events. And then whatever functions do I need? If I need to be updating the screen, well, update screen is going to be one of them. And there could be other functions that we could have in there as well. But based on what I see here, this function seems to work out fine because this function is in fact updating my screen. Everything about it is an update to my screen. So I really don't need any other functions to define here. And I don't know when it comes to rubric, if we wanted to just do a checklist with this rubric, I suppose we could just kind of see what, if we're doing everything here. All required inputs have created on events. I think we've done that. All variables are created and appropriately used for all pieces of the information in the app. Just check for yellow triangles, and I don't see any, so I think I've got that. An else if statement is used to correct certain options, did that. Function is used, which correctly updates all output elements, did that. No errors are present, fixed my warning. Comments are used to correctly explain the purpose and function of all on events and functions. Well, let's do that. Let's go and create some text, some comments. I'm going to go into show text to do that. Let me teach you guys how to write appropriate comments. So for this on event, grabs text from quote input box as the user types it. Grabs the font family selection made by the user. Grabs the background or grabs the color selection made by the user. And then grabs the font size selection from the slider control made by the user. Very simple comments. We don't have to, it doesn't always have to be perfect, but it's just enough to describe what's going on. Now, a user might try to understand what it's doing here. Sets the slider control to default position. Only necessary. I guess it's kind of one of those things like, when is it necessary? I suppose that's enough, and maybe if another programmer comes down the line and says, I don't like it here, we'll make a change. And I'm going to leave this here because that's a perfect quote for that. And then this one is going to be set properties of color output and quote output to reflect the selections made by the user. It doesn't have to be anything specific. I mean, don't be too verbose when it comes to these comments. Just enough to let the another programmer know what's going on here, and they should be able to at least read it enough and have at least enough understanding and knowledge of the language to be able to understand what's going on here. That's enough for comments. So I have fulfilled the comment section of this, and I should now receive a full grade. My advice to you for students that are watching this and they're going to copy exactly what I did, be careful, because teachers might see this project and go, well, you just copied him. But this is meant for teaching purposes. I would say that you should be coding this first, do the best that you can, get as far as you can. And I really mean, like, you need to code something. Don't start this and go, I don't know what I'm doing. If that's the case, well then, okay, we've got a video, and the videos are fine. It's taken me a while to get used to videos, but videos are fine. I even have to copy other tutorials, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase all of this and try it again. If you copied me, then my advice to you is I want you to now erase everything. I want you now to go back in version history, and I want you to go back to start over, and I want you to start completely from scratch. And this time I want you to code it 100%, and this time not watch my video when you do it. This is a great way to reinforce the lessons that I've taught. And in fact, even better would be, I want you to select different values for that if statement. Instead of the values that have been given to you, come up with different things, like a different font family and a different color for that if statement. And just get used to how this works. It's the only way that you're going to get good at this. You have to practice, and you have to come up with your own project. Do that project and get through this without really having to watch the video. This worked for me when I was learning Udemy, making video games. I copied my professor, and then I created my own game without trying to copy the professor or going back to certain places until I got used to it. So these videos are all out there, and it's very easy for a student to copy. My recommendation is, if you did copy my code, I need you to also write your code in your way. Everybody's got a distinct way of writing variables and whatnot. Write it your way. All right, I hope that this helps, and I'll make some more if people like it.